This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. I've got another exciting game for you today with Tim, Corwin, and Justin rejoining me. Tim is playing his Kaalia deck and wants to prove to me that she's no longer old news. He keeps Evolving Wilds, Swamp, Command Tower, Commander Sphere, Serra Emissary, Bruna, and Avacyn Angel of Hope. Corwin is playing his mono-red Ur-Dragon deck, keeping 2 Mountains, Arcane Signet, Cage Sun, Urza's Incubator, Leyline Tyrant, and Delina Wild Mage. Justin is playing his Morphing Kadena deck with Nantugu Vigilante, Overgrown Tomb, Silumgar Assassin, Underground Sea, Primordial Mists, and Scroll of Fate. Last but not least, I am rocking Ramos Mutate with Dragonskull Summit, Savai Triome, Birds of Paradise, Sunpetal Grove, Morphic Pool, Chittering Harvester, and Quandrix Command making up my opening hand. Justin wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws and plays a tapped Overgrown Tomb. Tim plays an Evolving Wilds, cracking it to find a basic. I play a tapped Savai Triome. Corwin wants to follow my example, playing a tapped Valakut and passing. Justin plays Underground Sea for turn, and then plays a face-up Den Protector and passes to Tim. Tim's got a Swamp and just passes to me. I play a Rootbound Crag, and then pay 1 green for a Birds of Paradise. Corwin plays a Mountain and taps 2 for Arcane Signet, shipping the turn. Justin has a Zoetic Cavern for his land for turn, and then taps 3 mana for Scroll of Fate. He passes to Tim after that. Tim's on theme with a Command Tower for turn, and he then casts a Commander Sphere. I play a Sunpetal Grove and just pass after that. Corwin has a Mountain, and pays 3 for a Leyline Tyrant thanks to Ur-Dragon reducing it by 1. At the end of turn, Justin activates the Scroll of Fate, manifesting a card from his hand. Justin activates his scroll again after drawing, and manifests a card from hand. He then plays out a Morph creature by paying 2, and goes to combat. He swings at me with a Den Protector, and I take the hit. Tim's got a Slayer's Stronghold for turn, and then casts Phyrexian Arena. He pays 2 for a Talisman of Hierarchy, and ships the turn after that. During his end step, I cast Eladamri's Call and go and find Migratory Greathorn, putting it to hand. I play an Overgrown Tomb untapped, taking 2, and then tap enough to mutate the Greathorn onto my Birds of Paradise. This has me going to find a basic, and I put out a tapped island. I then pass, and during my end step, Corwin floats a red mana to save it with the Leyline Tyrant. Corwin plays a Mountain for turn, and then taps out, using the floating mana to help cast Electro Dominance, and blast my Flying Greathorn for 4. He gets to cast a card that costs 4 less from hand, and he does so with Delina. He then passes to Justin. Justin draws for turn but is struggling to find lands. He once more manifests a card from hand by using the scroll, and he then pays to morph face up Silumgar Assassin and takes out Delina. Going to combat, he swings his team at me, and I take the hit. Tim draws and loses 1 from the arena and draws for turn. He then plays a Plains and taps enough for Kaalia. Once she's out, he activates the Slayer's Stronghold, taking 1 from the Talisman to help make a colored mana to activate it, and gives her Vigilance and Haste and 2/0. Going to combat, he swings Kaalia at Justin and puts out a tapped and attacking Avacyn Angel of Hope. Both connect with Justin's face, and Tim then passes to me. I draw and just cast Ramos and pass. Corwin's turn has him drawing and playing a Treasure Vault as his land for turn. He then taps 6 mana for a Cage Sun and names red. With that done, he passes. Justin draws but still can't find a land. He manifests a card from hand using the Scroll of Fate and passes after that. Tim draws from his arena, losing 1, and draws for turn. He then goes to combat, swinging Kaalia at Corwin and Avacyn at me. He gets his on-attack trigger from Kaalia, putting out Serra Emissary, and as it comes in, names creatures. We then both take our hits. In Tim's second main phase, he then hardcasts a Ruin-Scarred Demon and goes to tutor for a card to put to hand. With nothing else, he passes turn. I draw for turn and play a Morphic Pool as my land drop. I then cast Dax Duplicant and have it come in as a copy of Avacyn. And because clones don't target, I get around the protection from the Serra Emissary. And Ramos also gets 2+1/+2 counters as well, because the duplicant is 2 colors. I then play a Quandrix command, picking the mode to bounce a creature, and giving Ramos 2 more +1/+1 counters. Plus Ramos gains 2 more +1/+1 counters as well from casting a 2-colored spell. I choose to bounce Avacyn back to Tim's hand, and once that's done, I remove 5 counters from Ramos to make 2 of each color of mana. I then use some of it to cast Time Wipe, bouncing Ramos back to my hand, and this wipes the board. I then go to combat and swing my Avacyn at Tim and get a Dethrone trigger to put a +1/+1 counter onto it. Tim then takes the hit, and I pass after that. Corwin plays a mountain for turn, and then casts Urza's Incubator, naming Dragon. He then plays out a Howling Mine and passes. Justin draws 2 thanks to the mine, and finally plays a land with a Flooded Grove. He then taps enough for Kadena, but sadly has no more follow-up and has to pass after she resolves. Tim draws from the arena, losing 1, and then draws 2 in his draw step. He casts a Soul Ring, and then plays out Dragon Tempest. He once more casts Kaalia, who comes in and gets haste from the Tempest trigger. He then moves to combat and swings her at Corwin. His on-attack trigger gets him the Avacyn again, who is also going at Corwin, and Corwin takes both angel hits to his face. With nothing else, Tim passes. I draw my 2 and play a tapped World Tree. I then swing my duplicant Avacyn at Justin since he's on the throne, adding a counter, and Justin then takes 10. In my second main phase, I then mutate Archipelagore onto the Avacyn, and I get a mutate trigger, tapping and keeping Kaalia tapped during Tim's next untap step. During my end step, Corwin then uses his mana to activate Treasure Vault, sacrificing it and making 3 treasures. Corwin plays a mountain for turn, and casts an Obsidian Charmaw, which as it comes in, blows up my World Tree. He then uses his Arcane Signet and treasures to help cast the Ur-Dragon, and passes to Justin. Justin draws his 2, and plays a tapped Watery Grave. He then casts a Simic Signet, and passes to Tim. Tim loses 1 from the arena, drawing from it, and then draws 2 in his draw step. Kaalia is still tapped sadly, which unfortunately for Tim is what his deck is built around abusing, so he has to hardcast an Archfiend of Despair, which unfortunately is countered by Justin with Counterspell. Going to combat, Avacyn then hits Justin for 8. In his second main phase, Tim then plays a tapped Orzhov Basilica, bouncing a land to hand and passing to me. I draw and cast Survival of the Fittest. I then activate it, discarding Cami of Whispered Hopes, and go to find an Insatiable Hemophage, putting it to hand. I then mutate it onto my Avacyn stack, draining my opponents for 2, and gaining 2. I also get 2 tap down triggers, keeping Kaalia tapped, and also tap down the Ur-Dragon. Going to combat, I decide not to take Justin out just yet, and I pass to Corwin. Corwin draws his 2, and plays a Command Tower. He then pays 5 mana in his main phase for Reign of Riches, making 2 treasure tokens as it comes in. Going to combat, the Obsidian Charmaw goes at Tim, and Corwin gets his Ur-Dragon trigger, drawing a card, and putting to field an Aggravated Assault. Tim blocks the dragon with Avacyn, and the dragon gets taken out. Corwin then moves to his second main phase, and activates the Assault, which untaps his Ur-Dragon. He then goes to combat, this time swinging the Ur-Dragon at Justin. He draws a card, and puts out a Commander Sphere, and Justin then gets taken out. Corwin then activates the Assault once more in his next main phase, untapping his creatures once again. He then goes to combat again, and he swings at Tim this time, who blocks with Avacyn. Corwin does get to draw though, and puts out a Hellkite Igniter, and with nothing else, passes to Tim. Tim gets his arena draw, losing 1, and draws his 2. He plays a Plains for turn, and then hardcasts a Balefire Dragon, which comes in, gaining haste, and dealing 1 to me with the Tempest trigger. Tim then goes to combat, swinging his team at Corwin, who blocks the Balefire but takes the Avacyn hit. Tim then casts a Baneslayer Angel in his second main phase and passes to me. I draw and play an Isolated Chapel for turn, and activate Survival of the Fittest, discarding Ramos to go and find a creature card. It's Vadrock, which I then mutate onto my Avacyn stack. This gets me 3 tap triggers from the Archipelagor, and I keep Ur-Dragon and Kaalia tapped, plus tap down Avacyn. It also drains my opponents for 3, and I gain 3. And I also get to cast from my yard the Eldamri's Call, tutoring for a Porcuparrot and putting it to hand. I then mutate the Porcuparrot onto my stack, tapping whatever's left, and draining my opponents for 4. And then get to cast a Quandrix command, adding 2 counters to my Avacyn stack, and bouncing Tim's Avacyn back to his hand. I then go to combat, swinging my Vigilance Avacyn at Tim to take him out. I'm then able to tap it to the Porcuparrot ability to deal 4 to Corwin and take him out, winning the game. Game review time. This game was 49 minutes and 57 seconds. And it was probably one of the best showings that my Ramos deck has ever had. It's really difficult to pilot, and I know a lot of people have been saying that I should stop mutating onto Ramos, but I just really like the idea of the giant robot dragon shifting its form into other things. I get serious Transformer vibes, but you are probably very right. I need to include other creatures that are very difficult to target or deal with, because having that indestructible Avacyn stack was just such a relief. I didn't have to worry about almost anything. It was great. Corwin's Ur-Dragon deck was pretty cool, and I love seeing people play multicolored decks but only focusing on one of them. Justin and Tim had played against the deck in the past, which is why Justin was so quick to deal with the Delina, as Corwin has had her out before in the past and had some pretty wild turns. Speaking of wild turns, that aggravated assault turn was brutal, and thank goodness I had an indestructible blocker to keep the Ur-Dragon from smashing my face in. Justin, despite the fact that he was playing Kadena, which is one of, as I've said before in the past, favorite Sultai decks, really struggled after the board wipe. He played so many of his Morph and Manifest creatures that he really didn't have a handful by the time Kadena finally came out. This was really unfortunate, and it seemed like so much of him getting back in the game, or at least getting more mana, was a result of the Howling Mine, meaning that he was several turns off from achieving this normally, which is just not where you want to be at. I think Tim did a pretty decent job showing that Kaalia can still be a threat. You really need to have a way to give her haste though, because if you can't attack with her the turn she comes out, she is gonna eat a piece of removal. I think Avacyn is also probably one of the best, if not the best, first things to put out since it protects Kaalia as well as protects your board. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.